15.07 Surely atheist campaigner Richard Dawkins is deliberately trying to wind people up with this tweet. I feel sorry for the Pope and all old Catholic priests. Imagine having a wasted life to look back on and no sex. 15.05 An Australian group representing the victims of sexual abuse has also reportedly welcomed Pope Benedict XVI's resignation, saying he had done little to stop the reign of terror of child rapist priests. The Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests, SNAP, issued a statement calling for the next pontiff to be more cooperative with inquiries into abuse claims, according to a report by the Australian Associated Press, AAP. Victims welcome the resignation of a church official with immense power who has done so little to stop the reign of terror of child rapist priests. In the eyes of many victims, Georg Ratzinger has personally done much to add to the huge number of victims and exponentially increase the suffering of those already harmed. 14.48 Wolfgang Schnapel, 34, a priest from Benedict's home region of Bavaria, said, "It was a huge surprise to me. I only heard when my mother called me from Germany. I think it would be nice if the next pope came from Africa or Latin America. And he needs to be younger than Benedict was, that would be a good sign to the church." Nicola Signorile, 53, from Bari in southern Italy said, "We're very sad. I think it must mean that he is much more ill than we have been led to believe, perhaps even getting towards the end of his life. If he has made this choice, it must be for a very good reason." Flora Joseph, 37, a nun from Tanzania, said, "It's very difficult to accept. I have been saying to myself, why is he leaving, why doesn't he want to continue? But he is an old man and he has so many appointments and meetings. I guess he just has no energy left anymore." 14.44 Who will be the next pope? Two African cardinals are among the early favorites to succeed Pope Benedict XVI, as the papacy could head out of Europe for the first time in the modern era, writes Alex Spilius. Cardinal Peter Turkson of Ghana and Cardinal Francis Aarons of Nigeria are in the frame to become the first black pope probably ever, if not since the early Middle Ages. With Latin Americans and a Canadian also among the unofficial contenders, the Roman Catholic Church could well elect its first non-European since the Great Schism, reflecting the growing shift in faith and power of the Church to the developing world. 14.09 A group representing victims of child abuse in Catholic-run institutions in Ireland welcomed the resignation of Pope Benedict XVI after he promised a lot but delivered nothing. John Kelly, of the Survivors of Child Abuse Support Group said, "This pope had a great opportunity to finally address the decades of abuse in the church, but at the end of the day he did nothing but promise everything, and in the end he ultimately delivered nothing. We asked the Pope for sanctions against the religious orders who committed the abuse and the religious leaders in Ireland who allowed this to happen, but to our dismay nothing has happened." 13.41 Spanish newspaper El Mundo describes Pope Benedict XVI as God's sweeper who tried to resolve the numerous problems of the Church that did so much harm to its image. 13.12 Pope Benedict XVI improved ties between Judaism and Christianity, which helped reduce anti-Semitism around the world, the Ashkenazi chief rabbi of Israel said. A spokesman for Rabbi Yonah Metzger said, "During his term, the relations between the chief rabbinate and the Church, and Judaism and Christianity, became much closer, which brought to a decrease in anti-Semitic acts around the world." 12.54 Pope Benedict XVI was beloved by traditionalists but was held in lower regard by the reformers who dominated the Catholic Church in the post-war period. The Pope rarely shied away from communicating in no uncertain terms his views on a wide variety of subjects, famously declaring that condoms were an acceptable form of contraception if used by male prostitutes to prevent HIV infection, but only as a first step to a more humane sexuality. Some more of his most controversial statements. Abortion. Children are the major richness and the most precious good of a family. For this reason, it is necessary to help all people to be aware that the intrinsic evil of the crime of abortion, which attacks human life at its beginning, is also an aggression against society itself. Atheism. It is no accident that this idea has led to the greatest forms of cruelty and violations of justice, rather, it is grounded in the intrinsic falsity of the claim. A world which has to create its own justice is a world without hope. Gay marriage. There is a need to acknowledge and promote the natural structure of marriage as the union of a man and a woman in the face of attempts to make it juridically equivalent to radically different types of union. 12.40 The Archbishop of York, John Sentamu, has beaten the Archbishop of Canterbury into releasing a statement regarding the resignation of Pope Benedict XVI. With the news that Pope Benedict XVI will resign at the end of February, the Christian world will miss a great theologian with great spiritual depth. We should remember Pope Benedict communicated the revelation of God in a characteristic way as a true successor of St. Peter. He was unafraid to proclaim the gospel and challenge a culture that is so self-referential, managing to lift our eyes to God's glory. Let us all lift our eyes to the glory of God, embracing His love and care for this world. 12.34 Archbishop Vincent Nichols, the head of the Catholic Church in England and Wales, has saluted his courage and his decision in a statement. I am sure that many will recognize it to be a decision of great courage and characteristic clarity of mind and action. The Holy Father recognizes the challenges facing the Church and that strength of mind and body are necessary for his tasks of governing the Church and proclaiming the gospel. I salute his courage and his decision. I ask people of faith to keep Pope Benedict in their prayers. We Catholics will do so, with great affection and the highest esteem for his ministry as our Holy Father remembering with joy his visit to the United Kingdom in 2010. Pray, too, for the Church and all the steps that must take place in the next weeks. We entrust ourselves to the loving providence of God and the guidance of the Holy Spirit. 12.18 Mario Monti, the Italian Prime Minister, and head of the legislature in a country of 55 million Catholics said he was deeply shaken in a tweet. Sono molto scasso per questa notizia in attesa at Pontifex. 12.05 The Pope's tenure has of course been mired in the sex abuse scandal that has rocked the Vatican in the last decade, and by that of his butler Paolo Gabriele, convicted by a Vatican tribunal in October for leaking secret papal papers. AFP succinctly summarizes the tone of his tenure. His papacy has been marked by his efforts to revive the Catholic faith amid rising secularism in the West, as well as the scandals of child abuse by Catholic priests that was hushed up for decades. Benedict has championed Christianity's European roots and showed his conservatism by repeatedly stressing family values and fiercely opposing abortion, euthanasia and gay marriage. 11.58 A nicely put reaction from the editor of the Catholic Herald newspaper, Luke Coppin. Pope Benedict's pontificate has been full of surprises. This is the biggest one of all. 11.55 Catholic commentator Mary Kenny has told BBC News the decision is reflective of Benedict's intelligence and that he had done much for Anglicans in the UK who no longer felt the Church of England reflected their views. 11.50 German Chancellor Angela Merkel has released a statement through a spokesman on the resignation of the German-born Pope this morning. The federal government has the greatest possible respect for the Holy Father, for his accomplishments, for his lifelong work for the Catholic Church, was the government's statement. 11.38 And Widdicombe, the former Conservative MP who converted to Roman Catholicism in 1993, has told BBC News. Benedict has always been an extremely decisive pope. If he decided he couldn't carry on, he wouldn't hang around. It is fairly typical not only of the pope but of the man, and added, it is in the interests of the Church if someone who can do them his duties takes over. 11.36 This may be the Pope's last tweet to his 1.5 million followers. From the @Pontifex account, we must trust in the mighty power of God's mercy. We are all sinners, but His grace transforms us and makes us new. 11.24 In a 2006 article for Catholic Weekly The Tablet, Richard McBrien explored the possibility of a papal resignation even then for the frail pontiff, mentioning that the Church's Code of Canon Law explicitly allows for it. Mr. McBrien adds there is a precedent of at least 4 and possibly 6 previous popes who have resigned, in his words. Pontian in 235, when he realized that he would never return from exile. Silverius, who resigned in 537 under imperial threat, while also in exile. John XVIII in 1009, who is thought to have resigned shortly before death. Benedict IX, who abdicated in 1045 in favor of his godfather, John Gratian. Celestine V in 1294, the aged hermit. Gregory XII, the last pope to have resigned, in 1415, as part of a negotiated settlement at the Council of Constance to bring an end to the Great Western Schism, 1378–1417. 11.05 The Pope announced that he will leave his ministry at 8:00 p.m., 19:00 GMT, on February 28, said a Vatican spokesman, Federico Lombardi, this morning. Last year the Pope started using a cane on occasions, and recently he appeared to have trouble reading the text of an address he delivered in Rome. There was no immediate official comment from the Vatican, but we will bring you the updates as we get them. 11.03 Good morning. As we bring you the news that the Pope will resign on February 28.